I'm Tiffany Guarnaccia, the CEO of Kite PR. I'm here with Janet Balis from EY. Janet, can you take a minute to introduce yourself and tell us about your role?
Sure. So I'm a partner at EY and I lead our marketing practice. So for those of you who aren't familiar with EY is a large global professional services firm. We do work in tax, transactions, the audit and assurance business, and consulting. I'm in the consulting part of the business, and the work that I do with CMOs is focused on marketing transformation. Basically anything to create value on the CMO agenda, from data and technology to looking at the talent agenda for a CMO, to transform how they can grow, to looking at marketing effectiveness and ROI, and how they can work more closely with the entire media and marketing ecosystem. And before that, when I joined, let's see, now almost 8 years ago, which is kind of incredible to me when I think about it, when I came out of the media and entertainment industry, I actually came into a strategy role and I was leading the global sector consulting work to the entire media and entertainment industry. So focusing on everyone from agencies to television production companies to the cable networks and so forth and so on.
It's such an interesting time to focus on CMOs because it's such a big time of transformation and digital transformation overall. And you've had such an inspiring career path. You're also known for your innovative approach. Can you tell me a little bit about how you've challenged the status quo, both in your career and at your organization today?
Sure. I think that when I look back, and I won't go through all of the different places that I've had the opportunity to serve and to lead and be a part of teams, but I think a big part of it has, first of all, been choosing roles that were always at the cusp of innovation and disruption. So I am definitely someone who's attracted to change and the opportunity to always be learning, no matter what level I am in my career. And I'm also someone who leads through new ideas. I think it's an opportunity to really bring a tremendous amount of gravitas to the marketplace and to teams through new thinking. And I think that challenging the status quo actually brings a lot of new energy to organizations, but it also can challenge them in many ways. But when you have a lot of conviction, when you show humility in the way that you're bringing those new ideas to market, and when you're forming them in front of the team and in front of the market and constantly challenging yourself, I think it's really grounding to a team and energizing to everyone.
That's fantastic. And in every challenge, there's an opportunity, there's a new path forward. And you make such a good point when you look for roles, you've identified roles that have gone through a period of change and transformation. Are there certain kind of factors that you look for when you're potentially advising someone if they wanted to go down a similar career path and focus on transformation? What should they look for?
Well, I don't know that one can seek out transformation. I think transformation sort of seeks us out. And I think at this point, it's sort of all around us. I think there's probably not a role or an industry that isn't going to be impacted by all the disruption that's happening. And it's happening in every function. It's happening at all levels. It's happening in pretty much every industry and sector. So I think it's a really extraordinary time to simply prepare one's constitution for change, because for me, it's been real constant. I grew up, I started actually on the traditional side of media, but I chose to be on the digital side. I went through mergers and acquisitions and all sorts of very seemingly traumatizing events. But if you have a stomach for it and you decide, I really am excited to lead through change, meaning leading at all levels. You could be at the beginning of your career, the middle of your career, you could be in a very senior role, but the opportunity to really embrace that change and say, how do I stabilize this? How do I build the organization and my approach from the outside in? Seek generally what my customers need most, what talent needs most. If those are your grounding principles in those moments, it can be really satisfying.
I love that, Janice, to think about how you can lead through change, because change sometimes feels scary, right? But change is constant when you think about the environment that we're in or the careers that we're in. And when you think about your career path, how have you relied on mentors throughout?
I don't know that I would say I've relied on mentors. I think that most people probably don't. I think people are enriched by mentors. I think we rely on ourselves. And I think we rely on the networks of fabulous people that we have the opportunity to work with at any given moment in time, and the people that we've worked with cumulatively over the course of our career. But I deeply appreciate all the mentors I've had the fortune of getting to admire. I think about people who've really, frankly, not just mentored me, but sponsored me. And I think that that's probably an even more valuable concept. People who unequivocally have uh, gone to bat for me and who've really understood that next level of what I was capable of, frankly, before probably I even necessarily believed in it myself. It was in those moments that I probably opened up the next level of my possibilities. And so I deeply appreciated that. But I think self-reliance is super important, being able to use everything available to you. You know, digital is obviously a moment of tremendous empowerment. I think younger generations are trained and around being super empowered, whether it's Discord or Reddit or TikTok. I mean, we're all using lots of different sources to be able to ask any question. The other side of search is find. And so, you know, the opportunity to really find pretty much anything and everything and learn it, whether it's through a traditional academic institution or it's through more radical and widely sourced sources. I think there's just so many opportunities to feel incredibly empowered and rely on your network of people, your network of sources, and the fact that there's so much we can do for ourselves to continuously learn and create new opportunities.
I love the point you made when even in thinking about traditional mentorship, it doesn't have to be a traditional structure. It could be about someone who's empowering you, someone who's celebrating you as you lead through change and helping you create new opportunities and really think about where you feel like is the best next step for your career. And when you reflect on working with so many individuals, do you think there's a piece of advice that you would pinpoint as maybe the best advice you've received along the way?
I think the best advice has definitely been around building my brand and really understanding the attributes about myself that I needed to express internally, because I've always been very externally market driven. I have a tremendous passion for sort of being outside the building, so to speak. And obviously, in the pandemic and in the hybrid world, I'm not sure we all know what outside the building even is anymore. But you know, whatever function you're in, whether you're in product strategy or finance or marketing or sales or PR or communications, you know, it's very easy in any particular part of a company to end up focusing on the internal dynamics. And I think there's a tremendous opportunity, obviously, to focus externally, as I said, you know, on what you need from the outside world, from your customers, your clients, your talent pool that you're going to use to grow the business. And that makes a lot of sense. So that's my natural inclination. And so I think that some of the best advice I was given was to really make sure that I wasn't shortchanging the opportunity to tell the story internally, because the assumption that people will simply understand or know what your market impact is, it may not be a foregone conclusion. So making sure you take the time to balance that internal and the external, even if you're exceptionally market driven, which I still believe is the right answer, but just taking the time to make sure that those brand attributes are recognized and understood internally as much as they are externally.
That's great advice, Janet, to really tell your own story and focus on your personal brand. And oftentimes, I think that question comes up with young professionals. How do I develop my personal brand? How do I
For
continue
sure.
that? And it's oftentimes externally that we view as where the importance is in developing your personal brand, but it's an internal story as well. It's how you're advocating for yourself within an organization. That's just great advice overall. When you think back to the beginning, is there advice that you kind of wish you knew when you started your career?
Sure. I think that the advice I wish I'd known at the beginning of my career was that it's not a meritocracy. And I wish that maybe that weren't true, but I think that I assumed that great work spoke for itself. And I think a lot of the people that I mentor, I advise them that is the ante to be in the game. So you have to do great work. There's no question. But the notion that great work will speak for itself and necessarily lead to that promotion or necessarily lead to that next opportunity, that may be the case, but you can't assume it. So going back to the brand building, and going back to the notion of external contacts and network, have to make sure you're putting those into place too. So just getting your to-do list done is not enough. And I also spend a disproportionate amount of my time really thinking about the attributes of women leaders. And if you look, obviously, women are disproportionately underrepresented at the top of organizations. And so when you look, you know, at what sort of happens in the messy middle, you know, one of the things that happens is they're really focused on getting their jobs done, which, by the way, I'm not suggesting you should not do. But if you rely solely on it to be a meritocracy and great work to speak for itself, you probably are going to be shortchanged, because men outpace women in terms of their network, both inside and outside of the company, and they outpace women in the middle of their career in terms of their brand building. So if you're going to get to the top of an organization, you do have to invest that time to not only do great work, but also make sure that your brand and your network are sufficient to drive your success.
That's a great point, thinking about not only doing great work, but how do you go beyond that? So that comes back to really your personal brand, but then how do you develop that? And for you, it's leading with change. It's all about transformation. When you think about the advice you might give to a rising star who sees you and is inspired by your career path, and they're looking to continue on that journey and be in a role similar to yours, what advice would you give them?
Practice communication skills. And whether or not someone aspires to do what I now do, which, by the way, I was not comfortable with at the beginning of my career. I mean, now I'll speak to, very, very large ballrooms of people and do lots of incredibly high profile writing and things like that. I choose to do that, and I really enjoy it, but it was not my natural inclination. But whether it's writing a perfect email or doing an exceptional sales presentation or actually doing public speaking or thought leadership in a written form, I can't emphasize enough, communication skills are so critical. And I have to say, I'm not convinced that younger generations are spending enough time because of the current dynamics of social media. And yes, I sound like an old person, but that's okay. I am one. But I also am a mother of 3 young people, and I watch them develop, and I get it. Like, we're attention starved. We are probably all going to need, orthopedic thumb surgery, at some point, because we'll have been scrolling too much. I get it. But, being able to crisply make an argument, being able to crisply advocate for yourself, being able to crisply sell in your solution, whatever it is, I can't emphasize enough. Logic and being able to structure ideas cleanly, and then being able to articulate them cleanly, it couldn't possibly be more important.
That's such great advice to think about, just communication skills. And oftentimes we talk about nailing the basics and nailing that and going beyond. So it's public speaking, it's looking at writing, so written and oral communications, and that's going to get you really far. You mentioned being a mom, and that's something that, I've kind of learned along the way, a lot of the lessons that I've had, and maybe balancing between the two. And maybe there's no perfect formula for work-life balance, but when you think about a skill that was hardest to learn along the way, for me, I'd probably say balance, and then balancing between motherhood and
Yeah.
professional life is a big one. What do you think yours would be? And what did you do to develop it?
Self-forgiveness, because I don't think balance is possible. So you're probably going to be missing something professionally or something personally, and there's an opportunity cost to everything in life. And I think that it's just about giving yourself the freedom to say it's okay. I think that's probably the hardest thing we all do, because we're assuming that there's something we gave up that was worthwhile. And I think also in this FOMO moment, it's FOMO on the home front or it's FOMO on the professional front. And those really compete. So just believing that you made the right choice and that it's going to be okay is really important.
And in this time of change and transformation, there's been a lot of disruption. If you think about the work environment and how it's changed post-pandemic, there have been shifts that, in some ways, the flexibility that we now have and work from anywhere provides a lot of opportunities. So
Yeah.
like, even in the Kite Hill environment, we're trying to do a lot to help to promote that flexibility overall. Do you think, in terms of leadership style, is there a certain way that you feel like, beyond leading with change and embracing the disruption, that you start to feel like is your defined leadership style, or even other females around you that you've pinpointed and said, these are great examples of female leaders in the industry?
I think from a leadership standpoint, I would say there's nothing I would ask of anyone on my team that I wouldn't ask of myself. So I always start with that. I do very much lead by example. And when I think about some of the leaders that I personally have admired, I think it's also about setting a standard. So it's about leading by example, but when I look up to the people who I really find remarkable, they have attributes that are genuinely aspirational. They're always learning, they're global in nature, they're incredibly multidimensional. They are very externally focused, even as they do a lot of internal mentoring and teaching with their organization. They are thought leaders. They're straightforward and effective communicators. All of those things are gifts that we get to work with. So I think when I look to the people who I admire and the leadership qualities that I try to exhibit myself, those are probably on the top of the list.
Great. Thanks, Janet. Well, I certainly look up to you as an inspiring leader in the industry. You've certainly been someone who's seen change on the horizon and have steered businesses to success. And when you think about the industry, what do you think is the biggest disruptor on the horizon right now? Does it create opportunities for aspiring professionals?
Well, as you said, every disruption creates both challenges and opportunities. I do think, and it may seem cliche at this particular moment, but I don't think it's going away. I do think AI is definitely going to be one of the biggest disruptors. On the one hand, it will be an accelerant to be able to augment our capabilities as humans. So we can do research more effectively, or we can produce creative more effectively. There are lots of things that can accelerate for us. On the other hand, if we can look at all the things that we do as humans, and if everyone has access to, let's just call it a better tool set, for example, if I can go from text to code, one might say that there are a lot of things that are going to be both commoditized and become less relevant for humans necessarily to do quite the same way. So I think there are some compelling arguments that we're going to really have to strive to be more original in our thinking. We're really going to have to demonstrate our value. And I definitely think across pretty much every function of a company and across every sector, AI is the number one thing that I think can both unlock tremendous value and really changes the way we work. I am extremely excited about it because as a person who's working on a lot of data and digitally driven transformation, you can immediately see how many things inside of the enterprise and externally in terms of marketplaces and ecosystems can be optimized if you just connect the dots. But of course, people, process, normal technology can only go so fast. And so even when you're doing transformation exceptionally well, it can only go at the pace of traditional transformation. And I think AI is going to be an absolute game changer in terms of the possibilities, which is going to create a lot of marketplace value. So that's what I've got my eye on.
That's such a great point. And it comes back to, I think a lot of the reactions we saw from the industry was kind of around the rollout of AI. This change is scary, but there's so much opportunity. And what I'm reminded by, even in your statements, is that we're a business of people when I think about the kind of work that we do, and technology is a great enabler. So it can really add value to the work that we do. It can create efficiencies. There's opportunities that we have on the horizon. I'm really thoughtful about how we're taking that approach. It felt like just a few years ago, maybe more than a few. I remember a Communications Week 2016 session when we were talking about the rollout of AI, challenge thinking around bot or not. Was AI going to take our job as PR professionals? The answer then was no. But even some folks investing in AI felt like they were taking that leap of faith around the rollout of some of these new technologies. Do you think you've ever taken a leap of faith in your career before?
Oh, I definitely have. I think that some of the biggest leaps of faith have definitely been around roles. And I can remember one in particular where it was a huge jump in my career, I can simply say. And the leap of faith was that someone saw something in me that I'm not sure I saw in myself, but I would have been crazy not to take it. And I also happened to be pregnant at the time. So it was, I had to take multiple leaps of faith. One, that I could do the job, and two, that I was going to survive this whole conundrum of work and life that we were just talking about a moment ago. And I think, so often we ask ourselves, am I ready for this role? do I have what it takes? And I think that working backwards from it, which is just taking the leap of faith and saying, yes, I do. Someone else sees it in me, and working backwards from that outcome, because in this case, someone who is a future mentor, at this point, someone who is going to be my new boss and president and CEO of that organization, it was absolutely worth taking that leap of faith, because but for that change in my career, I would not have been afforded that tremendous leap in responsibility, in opportunity, in challenge. And when we face incredible challenges, we often step up to those challenges and transform ourselves in really remarkable ways. And it's not easy, but when we do it, we come out in remarkable ways to be able to do so many new things that are just dramatically new scale.
Janet, thank you so much for the inspiration today, teaching us to not only embrace change, but lead through change, really leading the way. Is there anything else you'd like to share?
I guess I would just share that generally speaking, we do our best thinking and our most important change when we're uncomfortable. So if you're uncomfortable, instead of writhing in discomfort, sort of wallow in the beauty of that moment, which is it's actually an amazing opportunity to create new value for yourself and for the world and for the marketplace, and enjoy it, and just believe in yourself, and don't forget to build a brand and understand your superpowers along the way.
Love that. Don't forget your personal brand and your superpowers. That's something we really need to lean into. Janet, thanks again for joining us. I appreciate your time today.
My pleasure. Great to be with you, Tiffany.